The massive chamber stretched high above them with walls that seemed to shimmer and shift colors every few seconds. Kevin Morrison stood at the center platform wearing his dark blue ambassador uniform with the Earth insignia on his shoulder. He had been coming to this place for 3 months now, and every single time the result was the same. The alien species sitting in their elevated seats around him would listen to his words and then they would laugh. Not the friendly kind of laughter, but the cruel type that made his stomach turn into knots. Lisa Hayes stood 2 steps behind him in her military dress uniform. Her hand rested near her communication device that was hidden under her jacket sleeve. She watched the aliens with careful eyes and noted every movement and every sound they made. The Vexthari looked like giant crystals shaped into bodies, and their leader Thexol sat directly ahead of them, glowing with a pale blue light. To the left were the Kordath warriors, who resembled massive armored bears with 4 arms and sharp teeth that showed when they spoke. Their chief Drachmon had scars across his face from countless battles. On the right side sat the Zanari, whose bodies seemed almost human, but their heads were larger and their eyes were completely black without any white parts. Kevin took a deep breath and began speaking again. His voice echoed across the chamber through the translation devices that converted his words into sounds and thoughts that all species could understand. He told them about the 47 colonies that humans had built across 12 different star systems. He explained how human scientists had cured diseases that had plagued other species for generations. He reminded them about the technology Earth had shared freely without asking for payment. He talked about human art and music and literature that had been welcomed on hundreds of alien worlds. Then he asked for the same thing he had asked for during every previous meeting. He wanted humanity to be recognized as equals with the right to govern their own territories and make their own decisions. The chamber fell silent for a moment, and Kevin felt hope rising in his chest. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe they had finally listened to reason. Then Thexol began to glow brighter, and his voice came through cold and sharp like broken glass. The translation device rendered his words clearly. Humanity could keep Earth and the solar system where they were born. That was more than generous for a species that had barely learned to keep their own planet from destroying itself. The other systems that humans had settled belonged to the Galactic Council, and humans were simply allowed to live there as guests. Kevin felt his jaw muscles tighten, but he kept his voice calm. He pointed out that humans had been in space for 50 years now and had proven themselves peaceful and productive. Other species had been granted full rights with far less accomplishment. Why was humanity being treated differently? Drachmon leaned forward and his forearms gripped the railing in front of him. His voice came out as a growl that the translator turned into words. Rights were not given away like cheap trinkets at a market. They were earned through thousands of years of existence. Humanity had been traveling between stars for less time than it took a Kordath child to grow into an adult. They would take what they were offered and be grateful for it. The Zanari representative spoke next, but not with sounds. The words appeared directly inside their minds, which always made Kevin feel uncomfortable, like someone was touching the inside of his skull. The message was clear and insulting. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, when humans had learned to control their violent impulses and their chaotic governments, they might be ready for real responsibility. Until then, they should be content with their current status. Several other species in the chamber made sounds that the translator identified as laughter. Kevin looked around at their faces and saw the same expression on all of them. They thought humanity was a joke. They thought humans were children playing at being adults. They had no respect and no intention of ever giving humans what they deserved. Kevin closed the datapad he had been holding and looked up at Thexol. He spoke slowly and clearly. "Then we are done here." He turned and walked toward the exit with Lisa following close behind. More laughter erupted from the assembled aliens. They had heard empty threats from young species before. None of them ever amounted to anything meaningful. Species that challenged the Galactic Council either learned their place quickly, or they disappeared. The Council had been running the galaxy for thousands of years, and they knew how to handle upstarts. Kevin and Lisa walked through the long corridor that led away from the chamber. Neither of them spoke until they were inside the small ship that had brought them to the Council station. The moment the door sealed shut, Lisa pulled out her communication device and entered a code that she had memorized months ago. The message was brief and used a cipher that only a handful of humans could decode. It said Protocol Defiance is authorized. The message shot through space faster than light, traveling through the quantum communication network that humanity had secretly built. Within seconds, it reached Earth and Mars and every human colony scattered across the stars. Within minutes, every human ship and station had received the same message. The waiting was over. The pretending was finished. Now the real work would begin. What the Galactic Council did not know was that humanity had been preparing for this exact moment since the very first time they were laughed at and dismissed. While Kevin had been standing in that chamber begging for scraps, human engineers had been working day and night in hidden facilities. While Lisa had been standing at attention listening to insults, human soldiers had been training for a kind of warfare the galaxy had never seen. While diplomats spoke soft words, scientists had been building weapons that did not destroy but terrified. The Council thought they knew everything about humanity. They had studied human history and seen the wars and the violence. They assumed humans were just another aggressive species that could be controlled through superior force. They were about to learn that humanity's most dangerous quality was not their weapons or their anger. It was their ability to adapt and their refusal to accept defeat. It was their talent for finding new solutions to old problems. It was their spite when pushed into a corner, and their creativity when told something was impossible. Kevin sat in the pilot seat and set course back to Earth. Lisa checked her communication device and saw confirmation messages coming in from every human colony. Everyone was ready. Everything was in place. She looked at Kevin and saw a small smile on his face. "How long do you think it will take them to realize what we have done?" Kevin pulled back on the controls and the ship jumped into faster-than-light travel. "Not long. But by the time they figure it out, it will be too late to stop us." The trip back to Earth took 6 hours, and during that entire time, neither of them spoke much. They both knew what was coming next would change everything. The Galactic Council had ruled the galaxy for so long that they had forgotten what it felt like to be afraid. Humanity was about to remind them. The Zenari monitoring station picked up the strange readings exactly 6 hours after the failed peace talks ended. The junior technician stared at his screen showing quantum fluctuations coming from the direction of Earth's solar system. He called his supervisor, who looked at the data and felt something his species rarely experienced, which was confusion. The patterns made no sense according to any known physics. By the time they sent a probe to investigate the source, had vanished completely along with everything else in that region of space. Greg Turner stood on the bridge of the Valiant watching the countdown. Clock ticked down from 60 seconds. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with focused efficiency. They had trained for this moment hundreds of times in simulations, but now it was real. Through the main view screen, he could see Earth below them looking peaceful and blue. Across the planet's surface and scattered throughout the solar system, massive devices hummed with power. They had been disguised as weather control stations and mining equipment and scientific research platforms. Nobody outside of a small group of human leaders knew their real purpose. Danny Price sat at the communication station and his fingers moved across the controls checking the status reports coming in from every human colony. The list scrolled past showing green indicators next to each location. Mars was ready. New Boston Colony was ready. Port Liberty was ready. All 47 settlements across 12 star systems reported the same thing. The quantum field generators were charged and waiting for the final command. Danny looked over his shoulder at Admiral Turner and gave a small nod. "All colonies reporting ready status, sir." Turner felt the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on his shoulders. Once they activated the generators, there would be no going back. Humanity would be committed to a path that could lead to their greatest triumph or their complete destruction. He thought about the faces of the council members laughing at them and dismissing them like they were nothing. He thought about the millions of humans living on those colonies who trusted their leaders to keep them safe. He took a breath and spoke in a calm voice. "Give the order." Danny's fingers danced across his console, sending the encrypted signal that would change everything. The transmission shot out at faster than light speed, reaching every human settlement almost instantly. On Earth, the massive generators began to pulse with energy that bent space itself. On Mars, the same thing happened. On every colony, world, and space station, the carefully hidden devices activated in perfect synchronization. The effect was immediate and spectacular. A shimmering field of quantum energy wrapped around Earth, making the planet flicker and fade from normal space. Within seconds, the home world of humanity simply ceased to exist in any way that could be detected by the galaxy's most advanced sensors. Mars vanished next. followed by the colonies in alphabetical order according to their registry codes. New Boston disappeared along with its 3 million inhabitants. Port Liberty phased out of reality, taking its orbital shipyards with it. One by one, every human presence in the galaxy slipped behind a veil that made them invisible and untouchable. Ships that were traveling between systems received the activation signal and engaged their own smaller generators. They flickered and faded, becoming ghosts that could see the universe but could not be seen in return. Helen Grant watched from her laboratory deep inside a facility on Mars that was now hidden from the galaxy. She had spent 7 years developing the theoretical framework that made this possible. The breakthrough had come when human archaeologists found fragments of precursor technology buried in the Martian soil. The precursors were an ancient race that had vanished millions of years ago, leaving behind artifacts that current galactic civilization barely understood. Helen and her team had studied those fragments and combined them with human quantum mechanics research. The result was something unprecedented. They had found a way to shift matter into a parallel dimensional layer where it remained physically present but completely undetectable. The response from the Galactic Council came faster than anyone expected. Within 12 hours, a massive fleet of 300 warships assembled at the edge of the Sol system. The Kordath brought their heavy battle cruisers bristling with weapons designed to crack planets. The Vexithari contributed sleek ships that could manipulate gravity itself. The Zanari sent vessels equipped with sensors so sensitive they could detect a single atom from light years away. They surrounded the area where Earth should be and found absolutely nothing. The system appeared completely empty, as if humanity had packed up and left without a trace. Kyle Stevens commanded the Kordath flagship Revenge of Honor, and he could not believe what his sensors were telling him. There was nothing there. No planets, no stations, no debris, just empty space where a thriving solar system had existed hours before. He opened a communication channel that broadcast on every frequency known to galactic science. His voice carried the anger and confusion he felt. Humans, your tricks cannot hide you forever. Surrender now and face justice for your disrespect. The punishment will be measured if you cooperate. Silence answered him. The fleet waited for 3 days, scanning constantly and finding nothing at all. The Vexithari tried using gravitational detectors to find mass that might be hidden. The Zanari attempted to sense human minds through their telepathic network. The Kordath simply fired weapons at random coordinates, hoping to hit something by chance. Nothing worked. Humanity had vanished so completely that some species began to wonder if they had ever existed at all. Perhaps Earth had been destroyed by some natural disaster. Perhaps humans had developed faster than light technology far beyond what they had shown and simply fled to another galaxy. The truth was simpler and more frightening. Humanity could see the fleet perfectly well. Every human sensor was locked onto the Council ships, tracking their movements and recording their communications. The quantum veil was one way. Humans could observe normal space without any difficulty, but nothing in normal space could see them. More importantly, they could reach out from behind the veil to strike at targets while remaining completely safe from retaliation. Lisa Hayes prepared the message in a small office on Earth that technically no longer existed in normal space. She had written and rewritten the words dozens of times, trying to find the right tone. Not too aggressive, not too weak, just enough to make the Council understand that they had made a terrible mistake. When she was satisfied, she handed the data file to the communications team. They fed it into a system that would bypass every defensive protocol and security measure the Galactic Council possessed. The message would appear simultaneously on every military vessel and every government building and every public broadcast station across Council space. The transmission started with Lisa's face appearing on screens throughout the galaxy. She wore her military uniform and her expression was calm, but her eyes were hard. She spoke slowly so the translation systems would have no trouble converting her words. You wanted to see what humanity does when backed into a corner. Now you will learn. We do not surrender. We do not beg. We evolve and we adapt. We remember every insult and every dismissal. You thought we were weak because we asked for peace. You thought we were simple because we offered friendship. You were wrong. The message continued with a list of coordinates that pointed to the Vexthari home system's primary trade hub. A timestamp appeared below the coordinates showing 72 hours. Lisa's face remained on the screen as she delivered the final words. You have 3 days to think about what comes next. We suggest you use that time wisely. The transmission ended, leaving millions of beings across the galaxy, staring at blank screens and wondering what humanity planned to do. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions trying to decide how to respond. Some argued for negotiation. Others demanded total war. All of them felt something they had not experienced in thousands of years, which was genuine fear. Somewhere out there, invisible and untouchable, an angry species was planning their next move. The Council had created an enemy that could strike from anywhere at any time without warning. They had laughed at humanity and dismissed them as children. Now they were learning that human creativity became most dangerous when combined with human anger. The Crystalline Nexus trade hub orbited the Vextheri Secondary colony world like a massive jewel catching the light from two suns. Over 2 million beings from across the galaxy lived and worked inside the station, which served as one of the most important commercial centers in Council space. When the 72-hour countdown reached 0, every security force on the station was on maximum alert. Sensors scanned in all directions looking for any sign of human ships. Defense platforms charged their weapons. Emergency response teams stood ready at their posts. They expected an attack and they were prepared to fight. Nothing happened. The minutes ticked by and the station remained peaceful. Controllers started to relax, thinking perhaps the human threat had been empty words designed to scare them. Then something appeared on the sensors for exactly 47 seconds. 20 ships phased partially into normal space, just long enough to be detected before vanishing again. They did not fire weapons. They did not launch missiles. They simply transmitted data directly into the station's core computer systems and then disappeared. Nicole Peters commanded the stealth frigate Shadow's Edge, and she watched her countdown timer reach 0 before giving the signal to her crew. The ship shimmered into partial visibility, just enough to establish a data connection with the station's networks. Her communications officer worked fast, uploading terabytes of information in compressed formats that would unpack themselves once inside the target systems. The upload completed in 38 seconds and Nicole ordered the retreat. Shadow's Edge slipped back behind the quantum veil, becoming invisible once more. The entire operation had taken less than a minute. The data packets spread through the station's networks like water flowing downhill. They bypassed security protocols using codes that had been stolen months ago during what everyone thought were routine system maintenance checks. The files unpacked themselves and began copying to every connected device. Within an hour, the information had spread beyond the station into the wider galactic networks. News organizations received copies. Government officials found the files waiting in their personal accounts. Scientists and researchers discovered the data appearing in their laboratory systems. The contents were explosive, thousands of documents detailing corruption and lies that went back centuries. Medical research showing cures for diseases that affected dozens of species, but the Galactic Council had suppressed the information to maintain control over pharmaceutical markets. Reports about habitable worlds that had been declared forbidden zones not for safety reasons, but to prevent competition with Council-sponsored colonies. Records of entire civilizations that had been quarantined and left to die because helping them would have been politically inconvenient. Financial documents showing how Council members had enriched themselves while claiming to serve the greater good. The galaxy erupted in chaos. On 17 different Council worlds, protests filled the streets. Species that had lived under the thumb of the Council for generations suddenly had proof of what they had always suspected. The carefully maintained image of the Galactic Council as benevolent guardians shattered overnight. News broadcasts showed angry crowds demanding answers. Government officials scrambled to issue denials, but the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The humans had not attacked with weapons. They had attacked with truth, and it was far more devastating. Paul Henderson sat in his laboratory on Hidden Earth, reviewing the results of his work with satisfaction. He had spent 5 years developing what he called the neural marker. It was a harmless quantum tag that could be attached to biological signatures through airborne delivery. Every Council representative who had attended that final meeting with Kevin Morrison had breathed in microscopic particles that embedded the markers in their bodies. The particles were completely undetectable by medical scanners and caused no harm whatsoever. Their only function was to broadcast a unique identifier that human sensors could track. Now those markers activated. The Council members started receiving messages on their private communication devices. Messages that showed their exact locations updated every 60 seconds. Messages that listed the names and addresses of their family members. Messages that displayed their financial account balances, including the secret ones they thought nobody knew about. Messages that quoted from their private communications with embarrassing accuracy. The psychological effect was immediate and terrifying. They realized that humanity knew everything about them and could reach them anywhere at any time. Kevin Morrison's voice came through on every council member's private channel simultaneously. The message was brief and its tone was conversational, almost friendly. You wanted us to understand our place in the galaxy. Now you need to understand yours. We know where you sleep. We know who you love. We know what you fear. We can reach you whenever we want and you will never see us coming. Think about that next time you dismiss someone as beneath your notice. Linda Brooks watched the galactic news feeds from her office in what used to be Washington, but now existed in quantum shadow space. The carefully balanced power structure of the Galactic Council was collapsing in real time. Riots were spreading across multiple worlds. Minor species were demanding representation and fair treatment. The major powers were turning on each other, trying to deflect blame. What had taken the Council thousands of years to build was falling apart in a matter of days. Her aide entered the room and asked if they should proceed to Phase 2 of the operation. Linda shook her head. Not yet. Let them panic. Let them feel helpless. They need to understand what they did to us. The Kordath Empire grew frustrated watching their sensors fail to locate any human targets. War Chief Drakmon was a warrior who believed in direct action and decisive force. This invisible enemy that struck without warning went against everything his culture valued. He made a decision that would become one of the greatest military blunders in galactic history. He ordered his fleet to glass one of humanity's former colony sites. If they could not find humans, then they would destroy the places humans had been. Perhaps that would draw them out through rage and desire for revenge. The Kordath fleet moved into position around a world that had once held a human settlement of 50,000 people. They charged their planet-killing weapons and fired in a sustained bombardment that turned the surface into molten rock. They continued the attack for 3 hours, pouring enough destructive energy to sterilize the entire planet. When they finally stopped, the world below them was dead and lifeless. Drakmon felt satisfied that he had sent a message about the cost of defying the Council. Then his intelligence officer gave him news that made his blood run cold. The quantum field generators had already moved the planet and its population to safety days before. The Kordath fleet had just spent 3 hours bombarding empty space. The colony and all its inhabitants were perfectly safe behind the quantum veil. Human operators recorded the entire pointless attack and broadcast the footage across every galactic news network. The images of the mighty Kordath fleet firing repeatedly at nothing became an instant symbol of their impotence and fury. Species across the galaxy watched, and many of them laughed at the warriors who had always seemed so powerful and intimidating. George Hamilton commanded a deep space reconnaissance squadron that had been searching for high-value targets. His orders were to locate facilities that the Galactic Council wanted to keep secret. His team had spent weeks following leads and analyzing data patterns until they found something interesting. Hidden in a nebula that officially did not exist according to Council charts was a massive data archive facility. According to the intelligence they had gathered, this archive contained the complete historical records of Galactic Council operations, including all the files they desperately wanted to keep buried. The facility was protected by the most advanced defense grid in known space, automated weapons platforms, gravity mines, sensor nets that could detect a fly from 1,000 kilometers away. Any conventional attack would fail before it even started. But Hamilton's ships were not conventional. They operated from behind the quantum veil where the defenses could not see them. He ordered his ships into position and launched boarding teams through temporary phase windows that opened just long enough for the teams to slip through. The raid took 17 minutes from start to finish. The human soldiers wore armor equipped with personal quantum generators that kept them invisible. They moved through the facility like ghost-stunning guards with sedative gas and copying data from the archive's core systems. They took everything, every file, every record, every piece of evidence the Council had tried to hide. Before they left, they placed a note next to each unconscious guard. The note said, "Your employers are not who you think. They are," and suggested they read Section 47 of the archive. Section 47 contained proof that the Galactic Council had deliberately started wars between different species to keep them fighting each other instead of questioning Council authority. Millions had died in conflicts that were manufactured purely for political control. When the guards woke up and read the files, many of them resigned immediately. Some of them leaked additional information to the press. The revelations sparked outrage across the galaxy, making the earlier scandals seem minor by comparison. By the end of the week, the Galactic Council faced internal rebellion and an enemy they could not see or fight. They called for emergency negotiations, offering humanity whatever they wanted if they would just stop. Kevin Morrison's response was broadcast on every channel, reaching every corner of civilized space. Now you want to talk. Now you are willing to negotiate. But we learned something important from you. Power is not given by those who have it. Power is taken by those who refuse to bow. The message ended with another countdown and another set of coordinates, but this time the target was not specified. Every council world wondered if they would be next. The Zanari Collective made their move on the 8th day of the crisis. Their telepathic abilities had made them the intelligence masters of the Galactic Council for over a millennium, and they believed those same abilities would end the human threat. They gathered their most powerful telepaths from across their territory and linked their minds together in a massive network. The plan was simple. They would broadcast a psychic pulse across the entire galaxy, designed to locate human consciousness. No physical hiding place could protect against mental detection. Every human mind would light up like a beacon, showing exactly where they were hidden. The pulse would pierce through the quantum veil by targeting awareness itself rather than physical matter. Emma Sullivan had been waiting for exactly this kind of attack. She was a neuroscientist who had studied Zanari biology and telepathic mechanisms for 6 years. She knew how their mental powers worked at a level that most Zanari themselves did not understand. When human intelligence had first learned that the Zanari might attempt psychic warfare, Emma had begun developing countermeasures. She created a neural shielding implant that could be injected into the bloodstream and would spread throughout the nervous system. The implant did not just block telepathic intrusion, it reflected and amplified it back to the source. Every human in every colony had received the implant during what was officially called a routine vaccination program. Nobody outside the medical and military leadership knew the real purpose. When the Zanari pulse hit the quantum veil surrounding human space, it encountered 3 billion protected minds. The psychic energy bounced back, amplified 1,000 times stronger than it had been sent. 3 billion Zanari across their entire collective network experienced a feedback loop that flooded their consciousness with something they had never felt before. They experienced the accumulated emotions of humanity. Every memory of being dismissed and insulted. Every moment of determination and spite. Every ounce of anger at being treated as inferior. For a telepathic species that prided itself on emotional control and mental discipline, the experience was overwhelming. The Zanari were used to touching minds that were calm and ordered. Human consciousness was chaotic and intense and filled with contradictions. Humans could feel love and hate simultaneously. They could be terrified and brave at the same moment. They could experience crushing defeat and still refuse to surrender. The sheer intensity of human emotional depth crashed through Zanari mental defenses like a tidal wave through paper walls. The Zanari Collective withdrew from the coalition against humanity within 6 hours. Their official statement said they could not continue to oppose a species with such depths of conviction and passion. Unofficially, their telepaths reported that trying to fight human minds was like trying to fight a hurricane. You could not defeat something that powerful and chaotic. You could only get out of its way and hope it passed without destroying you. The first major crack in the Council's unity had formed, and everyone could see it. Frank Peterson led a team of 12 operatives on a mission that would widen that crack into a chasm. Their target was the Kordath homeworld, but they were not going to attack it. Instead, they would infiltrate it and observe. The team spent 2 weeks disguising themselves as members of a minor species that traded regularly with the Kordath. They wore sophisticated biosuits that changed their appearance and implanted voice modulators that altered their speech patterns. They arrived on the Kordath homeworld as part of a merchant delegation selling mining equipment. What Frank and his team discovered changed everything they thought they knew about the Kordath. The warrior culture that presented itself to the galaxy as unified and strong was actually fracturing from within. The older generation of Kordath leaders were desperate to maintain their power through constant military campaigns. But the younger Kordath were tired of endless war. They had seen other species achieving prosperity through trade and cooperation, while Kordath resources were drained by military spending. A growing movement of young Kordath wanted something their elders considered shameful weakness. They wanted peace. Frank's team did not sabotage anything or engage in violence. Instead, they did something far more subversive. They introduced young Kordath activists to human history and human philosophy. They showed them recordings of human civilizations evolving from warlike tribes into cooperative societies. They shared footage of human protests and demonstrations showing how citizens could challenge their leaders without weapons. They discussed concepts like democracy and individual rights, and the idea that authority should be questioned rather than blindly followed. The young Kordath absorbed these ideas like dry soil, absorbing rain. They had been searching for alternatives to their current system, but had no framework for imagining something different. Humans gave them that framework. Within 6 weeks, the largest anti-war movement in Kordath history erupted across their homeworld. Millions of young Kordath took to the streets demanding an end to pointless military campaigns. They called for resources to be redirected from weapons to infrastructure. They questioned why their leaders seemed more interested in galactic dominance than improving life for ordinary citizens. War Chief Drakmon found himself facing rebellion from within rather than enemies from without. When he ordered his fleets to intensify operations against humanity, half of his commanders refused to follow the orders. Some of them openly sided with the protesters. The mighty Kordath military machine that had been feared across the galaxy for thousands of years was tearing itself apart. The second pillar supporting the Council's coalition crumbled, leaving only the Vexitharii as a unified force opposing humanity. Prime Speaker. Thexel attempted to rally the remaining loyal species with promises of shared technology and favorable trade agreements. He offered access to Vexthari's scientific advances in exchange for military support against the humans. Some smaller species agreed, but most were hesitant. They had seen what humanity could do when challenged. The invisible enemy that struck without warning and knew all your secrets was terrifying in ways that conventional military power could never match. Better to stay neutral and hope humanity remembered who had not opposed them. Then Kevin Morrison appeared in the council chamber. He phased through the quantum veil directly onto the main speaking platform, materializing from empty air. Guards rushed forward with weapons drawn, but Kevin simply stood there smiling. He wore his ambassador uniform and carried no weapons. He raised his hands in a peaceful gesture and spoke in a calm voice. I am here to offer terms, not because we are losing. We are winning too easily, and honestly, it is becoming boring. We would rather build something productive than continue tearing down your civilization piece by piece. Thexel's crystalline form flickered with colors that indicated rage and shock. The audacity of a human appearing uninvited in the most secure location in council space was stunning. You dare come here after everything you have done? Kevin interrupted him with a slight wave of his hand. I dare because you have no choice except to listen. Let me explain your situation clearly. Your economy is collapsing because half the galaxy is protesting in the streets. Your military is scattered trying to find an enemy they cannot detect. Your intelligence networks are compromised. Your allies are abandoning you. All of this happened in less than 1 month. He activated a holographic display that showed real-time data from across council space. Economic indicators trending downward. Political instability spreading. Social unrest increasing. Military readiness declining. Every metric that mattered was moving in the wrong direction. Here is what happens next if you refuse to negotiate fairly. We start helping every species you have oppressed. We share our technology freely without restrictions. We teach them what we have learned about resisting unjust authority. Within 1 year, the Galactic Council will not exist. Not because we destroyed it, but because everyone else finally realizes they do not need you. Thexel's voice was carefully neutral when he asked what terms humanity wanted. Kevin listed them clearly. Full sovereignty over all claimed territories. Equal representation in all council affairs. Access to precursor archives and ancient technology. Public acknowledgement that the council was wrong to dismiss humanity's petition. The chamber erupted in outrage at the last demand. Admitting fault to a species barely 50 years in space was unthinkable. It went against thousands of years of tradition and hierarchy. Kevin waited for the noise to die down before continuing. You are thinking about pride right now. I understand that feeling. But while you decide, consider this carefully. What we have shown you over the past month is just the beginning. We have capabilities you have not seen. technologies we have not deployed, strategies we have not implemented. We can make this situation far worse for you than it already is, or we can become partners. We can share what we have learned. We can help stabilize the chaos we created. Humans are actually quite good at building things when we are not focused on destruction. Linda Brooks watched the transmission from Earth holding her breath. They had discussed this moment for weeks, debating whether revealing themselves was wise. Going visible was a calculated risk, but Kevin believed and most of the leadership agreed that true victory was not domination. It was respect earned through demonstrated capability. The question now was whether the Galactic Council was capable of learning that lesson or whether their pride would force humanity to continue the conflict until the entire galactic civilization collapsed. The Galactic Council took 3 days to respond to Kevin Morrison's offer. 3 days during which humanity maintained the quantum veil in the galaxy, held its breath waiting to see what would happen next. Behind closed doors, the council members argued with each other in heated debates that sometimes turned into shouting matches. The older members wanted to reject humanity's terms and continue fighting, despite the obvious futility. They could not accept that a species so young had brought them to their knees. The younger representatives saw reality more clearly. They understood that continuing the conflict would destroy everything the council had built over millennia. Better to accept loss with dignity than face total collapse through stubbornness. The deciding factor came from an unexpected source. The Janari Federation was a mid-tier species that had remained neutral throughout the entire crisis. They had no great military power and no significant economic leverage, but they had been watching carefully and learning from what humanity had done. Their ambassador contacted Kevin secretly through channels that the council did not monitor. They met in virtual space where their conversation could not be observed or recorded. The Janari ambassador asked Kevin a simple question that cut through all the political complexity. What kind of galaxy do you want your children to inherit? Kevin thought about that question for a long time before answering. He said he wanted a galaxy where species were judged by their actions and contributions, rather than how long they had existed. He wanted younger civilizations to have opportunities without being crushed by entrenched powers. He wanted cooperation between equals rather than domination by the strong over the weak. The Janari ambassador listened and then made a decision that would change galactic history. She would speak at the council and support humanity's terms publicly. When the council reconvened, the Janari representative stood before the assembled delegates and spoke words that resonated across the chamber. For too long, we have accepted a hierarchy based on age rather than merit. We have allowed tradition to override justice. Humanity has shown us that change is possible. They have shown us our own complicity in maintaining an unjust system. They prove that determination and creativity can overcome raw power. I vote to accept their terms in full, including the public acknowledgement of error. 17 other species followed the Janari lead within the next hour. Most of them were smaller civilizations that had lived under council control for generations. They saw an opportunity to reshape the galactic order into something fairer, and they took it. The tide had turned and everyone could feel it. Prime Speaker Thexal was experienced enough to recognize when a battle was lost. Rather than fight until the bitter end, he chose pragmatism over pride. The Vexthari had maintained power for 2,000 years by knowing when to bend rather than break. Thexal stood before the council and made the announcement that would define his legacy. The Galactic Council recognizes Earth and its colonies as a sovereign power with full rights and representation in all matters. We acknowledge that our assessment of humanity's readiness for independence was based on flawed assumptions. We welcome humans as equals in the governance of galactic civilization. It was not quite an apology, but it was close enough to satisfy the terms Kevin had demanded. The quantum veil began to lift, starting with Earth. The planet phased back into normal space, becoming visible to sensors across the galaxy. One by one, the 47 human colonies followed in sequence. Each world shimmered back into existence, demonstrating that humanity could disappear and reappear at will. The message was clear. Humans were choosing to be visible. They were choosing to participate. But they retained the capability to vanish again if circumstances required it. Greg Turner transmitted the stand-down order to all human military vessels. Thousands of ships emerged from quantum shadow space and returned to their normal patrol routes. Nicole Peters brought Shadow's Edge back to Earth, orbit her mission complete. The stealth frigate had spent weeks operating in enemy territory without being detected even once. Helen Grant and her scientific team began preparing briefings on quantum field technology. They would share some of their knowledge as a gesture of good faith, but not all of it. Humanity would maintain certain advantages as insurance against future threats. The first joint council session with full human representation took place 1 month later. Kevin Morrison took his seat among the delegates with Lisa Hayes standing behind him as Earth's military liaison. The same chamber that had mocked them weeks before now watched with wary respect. Nobody laughed. Nobody dismissed them. The dynamics had shifted completely. But the session was not just about humanity. Kevin had insisted that the smaller species who supported them also receive enhanced representation. The power structure was being rebuilt into something more equitable than what had existed before. Kevin gave an opening statement that was broadcast across the galaxy. "We did not do this to rule over you. We did not seek domination or revenge. We did this to prove that no species should be dismissed based solely on their age or origin. We did this to show that authority must be earned through just actions not inherited through tradition. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us, but only if we treat each other with genuine respect. We hope to build a civilization together that is better than what came." Before Linda Brooks addressed a massive crowd back on Earth that had gathered to celebrate what was being called Liberation Day, she spoke about what humanity had accomplished and what it meant for their future. What we achieved was not military conquest. It was a revolution of ideas. We showed the galaxy that power comes from determination and creativity, not just from weapons and age. We showed them that injustice can be challenged successfully if you are willing to take risks. Most importantly, we showed ourselves that humanity's greatest strength is our refusal to accept that things cannot change. Frank Peterson returned from the Kordath homeworld to find that the youth movement there had named their organization the Human Inspiration Coalition. They had not copied human culture exactly, but they had embraced the idea that questioning authority could lead to progress. The old war chief Drakmon had been replaced by a younger leader who spoke about finding honor through peace, rather than endless war. The Kordath were beginning a transformation that would take generations to complete, but the direction was clear. Emma Sullivan opened formal diplomatic channels with the Zanari Collective. The telepaths who had experienced human consciousness wanted to understand the species whose minds were so different from anything they had encountered. What began as curiosity evolved into genuine partnership. Zanari telepaths and human neuroscientists started collaborative research that would advance both species' understanding of consciousness and cognition. Even Thexal showed capacity for growth. In a private conversation with Kevin, he admitted something surprising. "We ruled for so long that we forgot why the council was originally created. It was meant to prevent the strong from dominating the weak. Somewhere across the centuries we became what we once opposed. Perhaps we needed you to remind us of our original purpose." Kevin appreciated the honesty and suggested they work together to reform the council into what it should have been from the beginning. The galactic economy stabilized as reforms were implemented. Species that had been exploited began receiving fairer treatment. Technologies that had been hoarded were shared more openly. The council transformed from an oligarchy of the old into something resembling actual representative governance. Change happened slowly, as it always did with civilizations spanning multiple star systems, but it was happening. Humanity did not relax their guard despite the positive changes. The quantum veil generators remained operational and hidden, but ready to activate if needed. Shadow's Edge and her sister ships continued their patrols, invisible guardians ensuring the peace held. Helen Grant's team kept developing new technologies, always staying ahead of potential threats. Trust but verify became the unofficial motto of Earth's security forces. They would participate in galactic civilization, but they would never again be helpless. 5 years after the peace talks collapsed, Kevin stood before the council presenting humanity's proposal for something called the Equity Initiative. It was a galaxy-wide program designed to help developing species achieve spaceflight and representation without facing the exploitation that humanity had experienced. We remember what it was like to be powerless. We remember being dismissed and treated as less than equals. We swore we would never let another species face that if we had the power to prevent it. The proposal passed with overwhelming support. 37 species volunteered resources and expertise. Even the Vexithari contributed significant funding, recognizing the political value of being seen as reformers. The initiative became one of the most successful programs in galactic history, helping dozens of emerging civilizations join the community of spacefaring species on equal terms. On Earth, a monument was erected at the site where the first quantum veil generator had activated. The monument was simple and elegant, just a black stone pillar with words carved in multiple languages. They asked us to know our place. We chose to make our place. May we never forget that freedom is not given but claimed by those brave enough to demand it. Lisa Hayes, now an admiral, stood at the monument with retired Ambassador Kevin beside her. They remembered the fear and determination of those early days when everything had been uncertain. "Do you think it will last?" she asked him. "The peace and the reforms and everything we built." Kevin smiled. "As long as there are humans willing to fight for it, yes. Not with weapons necessarily, but with ideas and determination. That has always been our real strength. The refusal to accept that things cannot change or improve. Above them, invisible to every sensor in the galaxy, a quantum-cloaked satellite maintained its watch. Humanity had learned their lesson well. They would participate in building a better civilization. They would share knowledge and work toward common goals. But they would never again be caught unprepared. Never again would they be dismissed or underestimated. The galaxy had learned what happens when you corner humanity and push them too far. Now they were learning something more important. What humanity could build when given respect instead of contempt. The peace talks had collapsed 5 years ago, and what followed had been terrifying for humanity's opponents. But what came after the fear was something better. 'Twas hope for the future and transformation for everyone.